The snow fell soft and steady that Christmas Eve, dusting the rooftops and sidewalks of the quiet little town like powdered sugar on a holiday cookie. Streetlights glowed golden through the flurries, and every house along the block sparkled with twinkling lights, plastic reindeer, and inflatable snowmen that bobbed gently in the cold breeze. Inside warm homes, families bustled, wrapping last-minute presents, stirring pots of hot cocoa, humming along to carols playing from old radios. It was the kind of night that felt wrapped in magic, the kind people write songs about. But not everyone got to step inside that warmth. Down on Main Street, near the grocery store with its bright red awning and cheerful Season's Greetings banner, a woman sat on the sidewalk just outside the automatic doors. She wasn't begging loudly or waving her arms, just sitting quietly, knees pulled to her chest, wrapped in a thin blanket that had seen better days. Her boots were worn through at the soles, her gloves mismatched, and her face, though tired, held a quiet dignity. A small cardboard sign rested on her lap. Anything helps. God bless. She didn't look up much. She'd learned long ago that most people preferred not to meet her eyes. Inside the store, the air was warm and smelled like cinnamon and fresh bread. Shoppers pushed carts filled with hams, pies, candy canes, and bottles of sparkling cider. Holiday music played softly over the speakers, something cheerful about sleigh bells and snowmen. Near the dairy aisle, a little girl stood on her tiptoes, peering into the freezer case. She was about 7, maybe 8, bundled in a puffy red coat that made her look like a cheerful marshmallow. Her cheeks were pink from the cold outside, and her dark eyes sparkled with excitement. She held a crumpled piece of notebook paper in one mittened hand, their last-minute Christmas baking list, scribbled in her mother's neat handwriting. Her father stood beside her, tall and steady, wearing a worn leather jacket and a look of mild exhaustion. He'd worked a double shift at the auto shop that morning, and had only just gotten home in time to help with the holiday errands. Still, he smiled when his daughter pointed excitedly at the chocolate chips. "We need these for the cookies, right?" she asked, voice bright. "Yep," he said, ruffling her hair. "And don't forget the marshmallows for hot cocoa later." She grinned, tucking the list into her coat pocket like it was a treasure map. They moved through the store slowly, past the canned cranberry sauce, the rows of colorful wrapping paper, the display of gingerbread house kits. The girl chatted nonstop, imagining how their cookies would turn out, wondering if Santa would really come this year. She was getting older but still wanted to believe, and asking if they could drive by the big light display on Oak Street after this. Her father listened, nodding, half lost in his own thoughts, bills to pay, a leaky faucet at home, whether they'd remembered to buy batteries for the new toy they'd wrapped that morning. But every time his daughter laughed or tugged his sleeve to show him something, he came back to the moment. That was his job, after all, to be present, even when life felt heavy. When they finally reached the checkout line, arms full of groceries, the girl bounced lightly on her heels, humming Jingle Bells. The cashier, an older woman with silver hair and a red Santa hat, smiled at her. "Big plans for tonight?" she asked as she scanned the milk. "Making cookies with Dad," the girl said proudly. "And then we're gonna watch It's a Wonderful Life." "Well, don't forget to leave cookies out for Santa," the cashier winked. "I won't," she promised. They bagged the groceries, paid, and stepped back out into the cold. The snow had picked up a little, and the wind bit at their cheeks. The girl zipped her coat all the way up and pulled her hood over her head. Her father carried the heavy bags while she held onto his free hand, swinging it gently as they walked toward their old sedan parked near the edge of the lot. That's when she saw her. Just outside the store's entrance, hunched against the brick wall, sat the woman in the thin blanket. Her breath came out in small white puffs, and her fingers, bare now, one glove lost somewhere, gripped the edges of her sign like it was the only thing holding her to the earth. She wasn't crying. She wasn't shouting. She was just there, still, cold. The girl stopped walking. Her father took another step before noticing and turned back. "What's wrong?" he asked gently. She didn't answer right away. She just stared at the woman, her wide eyes taking in every detail. The chapped lips, the faded coat 2 sizes too big, the way her shoulders shook just slightly in the wind. A strange feeling bloomed in the girl's chest, something between sadness and worry, but also a kind of quiet knowing. Like she understood, even if she didn't have the words for it. "Who is she?" she finally whispered, her voice barely louder than the falling snow. Her father followed her gaze. He'd seen the woman earlier when they came in, but he'd kept his eyes forward like most people did. Now, with his daughter watching, he couldn't just look away. She's someone who's having a hard time, he said carefully, choosing his words like stepping on thin ice. Maybe she doesn't have a warm place to stay tonight. The girl frowned. But it's Christmas Eve. I know, he said softly. Sometimes, life gets really tough for people. Jobs disappear, houses get too expensive, families fall apart, and then, well, sometimes people end up outside when they shouldn't. The girl looked back at the woman. The woman hadn't moved. She hadn't even looked up. It was as if she'd made herself invisible on purpose so no one would have to deal with her. But she's cold, the girl said, her voice trembling just a little. Really cold, her father sighed. He wanted to protect her from sadness, from fear, from the harsh truth that the world wasn't always fair or kind. He wanted to keep her wrapped in the soft glow of Christmas lights and sugar cookies and bedtime stories, where everything turned out okay. But he also knew that shielding her completely wasn't fair either. She deserved to see the world as it was and maybe, just maybe, learn how to make it better. Come on, he said, giving her hand a gentle squeeze. Let's get the groceries in the car. It's freezing out here. He started walking again, expecting her to follow, but she didn't move. He turned back. She was still staring at the woman, her small face full of something he couldn't quite name. Concern, yes, but also a kind of fierce tenderness that surprised him. Dad, she said, her voice firmer now. Can we help her? He hesitated. He thought about the tight budget this month, the fact that they barely had enough room in their own small house, the warnings he'd heard about strangers, safety, responsibility. He thought about how complicated adult problems were, and how easy it was to feel helpless. We can't fix everything, sweetheart, he said gently, but maybe we can do something small. He reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a $5 bill, the last bit of cash he had until payday. He handed it to his daughter. Why don't you give this to her? And maybe say Merry Christmas. The girl took the bill, but she didn't move right away. She looked at the money, then at the woman, then back at her father. Will that be enough? She asked quietly. He didn't have a good answer. It's something, he said. She nodded slowly, then walked toward the woman, her boots crunching in the fresh snow. Her father watched, heart in his throat, ready to step in if needed. The girl stopped a few feet away. Merry Christmas, she said softly, holding out the bill. The woman looked up then. Really looked, and for the first time, her eyes met the girl's. They were tired eyes, yes, but also kind, surprised, grateful. Thank you. Honey, the woman said, her voice rough but warm. Merry Christmas to you, too. The girl didn't leave right away. She just stood there for a moment, as if memorizing the woman's face. Then she turned and walked back to her father, slipping her hand into his again. They loaded the groceries into the car in silence. As he started the engine and turned on the heater, the girl stared out the window at the woman who had tucked the money into her coat and pulled her blanket tighter. Dad? She said after a while as they pulled out of the parking lot. Yeah? Do you think she'll be okay tonight? He glanced at her in the rearview mirror. Her eyes were big, serious, full of that quiet worry again. I hope so, he said honestly. I really do. She nodded, then leaned her head against the window, watching the town blur past. The lit-up houses, the glowing trees, the families hurrying home with armfuls of presents. And somewhere out there, one person sat alone in the cold, holding a $5 bill and a child's kindness like a tiny flame in the dark. The girl didn't say much the rest of the drive home, but inside her something had shifted. Not in a scary way, but in a way that made her feel both heavier and more awake, like she'd just glimpsed a part of the world that most people walked right past. And she knew, deep down, that she didn't want to walk past it either. When they got home, her mother greeted them at the door with a smile and a warm towel for the girl's cold hands. The house smelled like pine needles and sugar cookies. The tree twinkled in the corner, wrapped presents piled beneath it like promises. But as the girl took off her coat and boots, she kept thinking about the woman outside the store, about how her breath had looked in the cold air, about how she hadn't smiled, not really. But her eyes had softened when the girl said Merry Christmas later. As she helped her dad mix cookie dough in the kitchen, she asked, Do you think Santa knows about her? Her father paused, stirring slowly. I think Santa, Knows about everyone who's hurting, he said, but I also think he needs help from us. She thought about that while she shaped the dough into little balls. Maybe Santa couldn't fix everything. Maybe that wasn't his job at all. Maybe it was theirs. Outside, the snow kept falling, blanketing the world in quiet white, and somewhere not far away a woman sat in the cold, holding on to a small act of kindness like a lifeline, unaware that this night on this Christmas Eve would become the first thread in a story much bigger than any of them imagined. The kitchen filled with the warm, buttery smell of cookies baking in the oven. Holiday lights blinked softly along the windowsill, casting red and green reflections on the floor. The little girl sat at the table, carefully placing chocolate chips onto rows of cookie dough with the focus of a scientist. Her father stood at the counter washing mixing bowls, his sleeves rolled up to his elbows. Outside, the snow had slowed to a gentle drift, and the world felt hushed, wrapped in that quiet magic Christmas Eve often brings. But the girl couldn't stop thinking about the woman. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw her, the thin blanket, the bare fingers, the way she'd looked up with tired eyes that still held something gentle. It wasn't just sadness the girl felt now. It was a kind of restless worry, like a pebble in her shoe she couldn't shake. She kept glancing toward the front window as if expecting to see the woman standing there in their yard, lost and cold. "Dad?" she asked suddenly, setting down her spoon. He turned off the faucet and wiped his hands on a dish towel. "Do you think she's still out there?" He paused. He'd been hoping she'd forget, that the cookies and the carols and the glow of the tree would pull her back into the safe, happy bubble of their holiday. But kids don't forget things that matter. "Not really, I don't know," he said honestly. "Probably," the girl bit her lip. "It's so cold." "It is," he agreed. "And it's Christmas." He nodded slowly. "Yeah, it is." She looked down at her hands, then back up at him, her voice small but steady. "What if she doesn't have anywhere to go tonight? Like, at all?" He didn't answer right away. He walked over and sat across from her at the table, resting his elbows on the wood. "Some people don't," he admitted. "Shelters get full. Buses stop running. Sometimes there's just nowhere warm." The girl's eyes filled with tears, but she didn't let them fall. She blinked hard. "But it's Christmas Eve. Shouldn't everyone have somewhere warm?" He reached across the table and covered her small hand with his. "I wish they did," he said quietly. "I really do." She pulled her hand back and stood up, pacing the kitchen like a tiny storm cloud. She opened the fridge, closed it, looked out the window again. Then she turned to him, eyes blazing with a sudden idea. "Can we go back?" she asked. "Go back where?" "To the store. To check on her," he sighed. "Honey, it's getting late. And it's snowing again. But what if she's freezing?" Her voice cracked. What if she doesn't make it through the night?" He flinched. Not because it was dramatic, but because he'd had the same thought himself and pushed it down. Because it was easier to believe someone else would help. Because admitting how fragile life could be felt too heavy for Christmas Eve. "We gave her money," he said gently. "That's something." "But money doesn't make you warm," she shot back, and the truth of it hit him like a cold gust of wind. He looked at her, really looked. She wasn't throwing a tantrum. She wasn't being naive. She was seeing the world clearly, maybe more clearly than he was, and she was asking him to do better. Before he could answer, her mother came in, carrying a basket of folded laundry. "Everything okay in here?" she asked, sensing the tension. "The store lady," the girl said quickly, "the one outside. We left her there. In the cold." Her mother set the basket down and exchanged a look with her husband. She'd seen the woman too, on her way home from work earlier. She'd thought about stopping, but traffic was bad and she was late and, well, someone else would help, right? Now standing in her warm kitchen with her daughter's worried eyes on her, that excuse felt thin. "Maybe we should check on her," her mother said softly. Her father ran a hand through his hair. "It's risky," he said, "bringing a stranger home. I don't know her. What if she's just a person who needs help?" The girl interrupted. He fell silent. The truth was he'd been taught to be careful. To lock doors, watch strangers, trust no one too quickly. And those lessons weren't wrong. They'd kept his family safe. But sometimes safety could become a wall, and walls kept out the cold, but also the light. He looked at his daughter, at the way she stood there, small but unshaken, holding on to kindness like it was the most natural thing in the world, and he remembered his own father years ago, letting a stranded motorist sleep on their couch during a blizzard. You never know when you'll be the one needing a hand, his dad had said. Maybe it was time to pass that lesson on. All right, he said finally, standing up. We'll go check. The girl's face lit up like the tree behind her. But, he added firmly, we're not promising anything. We're just seeing if she's okay. And if she is, we come right back. Understood? She nodded fast. Understood. Her mother handed her a thick scarf and helped her back into her coat. Take this too, she said, pulling a thermos from the cabinet. Hot cocoa, just in case. They drove back through the quiet streets, snow swirling in their headlights. The town felt even more still now, like the whole world was holding its breath. When they pulled into the grocery store lot, the girl pressed her face to the window, scanning the entrance. And there she was, still sitting in the same spot, still wrapped in that thin blanket. Her head was bowed now and her shoulders shook, not from crying but from the cold. She looked smaller than before, like the night was swallowing her whole. The girl unbuckled her seatbelt before the car even stopped. Dad, please, she whispered, her voice thick with urgency. Please don't leave her outside. He turned off the engine and just sat there for a long moment, watching the woman through the windshield. He thought about his warm house, his wife waiting with cookies, the presents under the tree. He thought about responsibility, safety, the unknown. But then he looked at his daughter, her eyes wide, her hands clenched in her lap, her whole body leaning forward like she was ready to run out there if he didn't move. And he knew. He opened the car door. The cold hit him like a slap. He walked slowly toward the woman, his boots crunching in the snow. The girl followed close behind, clutching the thermos like a shield. When they were a few feet away, the woman looked up. Her eyes were red-rimmed but alert. She didn't speak, just waited. Hi, the father said, keeping his voice calm and low, like you would with a startled animal. We saw you earlier. With my daughter. The woman nodded slightly. It's really cold out here, he continued. And it's Christmas Eve. She gave a small, tired smile. Sure is, he took a breath. Would you like to come home with us? Just for tonight, get warm. Have something hot to drink. Sleep somewhere safe until morning? The woman stared at him, disbelief flickering across her face. She glanced at the little girl who was holding out the thermos now, eyes full of hope. You don't even know me, she said quietly. No, he admitted, but my daughter saw you and she couldn't stop thinking about you. And honestly, either could I. The woman looked down at her hands, then back at the car, then at the dark street beyond. For a long moment, he thought she'd say no. That pride or fear or years of being let down would keep her from trusting this strange offer on a snowy Christmas Eve. But then she nodded. Just for tonight, she said softly. If it's not too much trouble. It's not, he said. Not at all. The girl beamed and stepped forward, offering the thermos. Hot cocoa, she said, with extra marshmallows. The woman took it with trembling hands and wrapped them around the warm metal. A single tear slipped down her cheek, but she didn't wipe it away. Thank you, she whispered. They walked back to the car together. The father helped her into the back seat, then piled her few belongings, a small duffel bag, the blanket, the cardboard sign, into the trunk. The girl climbed in beside her, buckling her seatbelt with extra care as if making sure everything was just right. As they drove home, no one spoke much. The heater hummed. The wipers swished softly. The woman held the thermos like it was something precious, sipping slowly, her eyes closed. When they pulled into the driveway, the house glowed warmly against the night. Lights twinkled in the windows. Smoke curled from the chimney. The front door opened before they even reached it. The mother stood there, wrapped in a sweater, holding 2 mugs. Welcome, she said simply. The woman hesitated on the porch, looking from the warm doorway to the family around her, as if she wasn't sure she belonged. But the little girl took her hand gently, without hesitation, and tugged her inside. The warmth hit them like a hug. The smell of cookies, pine, and wood smoke filled the air. The Christmas tree sparkled in the corner, its lights reflecting in the woman's wide eyes. Come sit by the fire, the mother said, leading her to the living room. I've got soup on the stove too if you're hungry. The woman sat on the edge of the couch, still clutching her thermos, looking around like she'd stepped into a dream. The girl knelt beside her, Unzipping her own coat and draping it over the woman's shoulders, though it was comically small, it made the woman laugh, a soft, surprised sound. "You're too kind," she murmured. "Irad, no," the girl said seriously. "You're just a person, and people shouldn't be cold on Christmas." The adults exchanged a look over her head, part awe, part shame, part wonder. In that moment, the holiday didn't feel like tinsel and presents anymore. It felt real, human, messy and tender and true. Later, as the woman ate a bowl of soup and the girl showed her the ornaments on the tree, the father stood in the kitchen doorway, watching. He thought about how easy it would have been to drive past, to pretend not to see, to tell his daughter that's not our problem. But he hadn't, and because of that, a stranger was warm. A child's heart was full. And Christmas, real Christmas, had walked right through their front door. Outside, the snow kept falling. But inside, for the first time in a long time, someone felt seen. And that, more than anything, was the gift. The fire crackled softly in the living room, casting dancing shadows across the walls. The woman sat on the edge of the couch, her hands wrapped around a fresh mug of hot cocoa. This one made with real milk and a sprinkle of cinnamon, just the way the mother liked to prepare it. She hadn't said much since coming inside, but her eyes kept moving, taking in the tree with its mismatched ornaments, the stockings hung by the fireplace, the framed photos on the shelf showing years of birthdays, beach trips, and school plays. It was all so ordinary, so full of life, and that's what made it feel extraordinary to her. The little girl hadn't left her side. She sat cross-legged on the rug, leaning against the couch, chattering about the cookies they'd baked, how her favorite ornament was the one shaped like a snowman with a crooked hat, and how she'd stayed up last year trying to catch Santa, but fell asleep before midnight. The woman listened, nodding now and then, a small smile tugging at the corners of her mouth. It wasn't forced. It was real, like something inside her had thawed just enough to let a little light through. In the kitchen, the parents moved quietly, washing dishes and whispering in low voices. "Do you think this is okay?" the father asked, glancing toward the living room. "I think it's more than okay," the mother replied, drying a bowl with a towel. "Look at her. She's not dangerous. She's just tired and cold and human." He nodded, but his shoulders were still tight with worry. "I just don't want to put us or her in a bad spot. What if something goes wrong? What if something goes right?" She countered gently. "Sometimes the right thing isn't the safe thing. Sometimes it's just the kind thing." He exhaled, long and slow, and leaned against the counter. She kept saying, "Please don't leave her outside," like it was the most obvious thing in the world. "Because to her it is," the mother said. "Kids see the world without all the walls we build. Maybe we should listen." Back in the living room, the girl reached into a basket under the tree and pulled out a small, lopsided gingerbread man. "Want one?" she asked, holding it out. The woman hesitated, then took it. "Thank you." She broke off a tiny piece and popped it in her mouth. Her eyes closed for just a second. "Haven't had one of these in years. Why not?" the girl asked, not unkindly, just curious. The woman opened her eyes and looked into the fire. "When you're living day to day, you don't really plan for holidays. You just try to make it through the night," the girl frowned. "But Christmas is for everyone." The woman turned to her then, really looked at her. "You know, you're right. It should be." Just then the mother came in with a soft blanket, thick and fleece-lined, the kind you wrap around yourself on winter nights. "Here," she said, draping it over the woman's shoulders. "This one's extra warm." The woman pulled it around herself like a shield. "You didn't have to do this," she said quietly. "We wanted to," the mother replied, sitting in the armchair nearby. "And honestly, I think we needed to as much as you did." A silence settled over the room, but it wasn't awkward. It was the kind of quiet that comes when people are finally being honest with each other, when the masks come off and hearts speak without words. After a while, the woman spoke again, her voice low but steady. "My name's Clara," she said. The girl smiled. "I like that name." Clara gave a small laugh. "It means bright or clear. Kind of funny given how foggy everything's felt lately." The father came in then, holding a plate of the fresh-baked cookies. He set it on the coffee table and sat on the floor beside his daughter. "Help yourself," he said. Clara took one, then another. She ate slowly, savoring each bite like it was a memory. "These taste like my grandmother's," she said after a while. She used to bake them every Christmas Eve. We'd sit by the radio and listen to carols while the snow fell outside. What happened to her? The girl asked. She's gone now, Clara said softly. But the cookies, they bring her back just for a minute. The girl nodded like she understood. Maybe she did. Kids often understand loss better than adults give them credit for. They just don't have the words yet. The conversation flowed easier after that. Clara told them a little about her life. Not all of it, not the raw, jagged parts, but enough. She'd worked as a bookkeeper for a small company for 12 years. Then the owner got sick. The business closed, and the savings ran out faster than she expected. Her husband had passed away 2 winters before, from pneumonia after catching a cold he couldn't shake. Without him, the rent got too heavy. She'd tried shelters, but they were full or had long waiting lists, so she'd been moving between bus stations, 24-hour diners, and quiet corners near stores that didn't mind her sitting for a while. I never thought I'd be the one asking for help, she admitted, staring into her mug. I used to donate to food drives. Volunteered at the community center. Now, I'm the one standing outside with a sign. No shame in that, the father said firmly. Life knocks everyone down sometimes. What matters is whether someone's there to help you up. Clara looked at him, then at the little girl, then at the mother. You're that someone tonight, she said, and I won't forget it. Later, the mother brought out an old photo album, filled with pictures of Christmases past. They flipped through it together, black and white shots of grandparents, faded Polaroids of childhood Christmases with too many cousins and not enough chairs, a picture of the family's first dog wearing a tiny Santa hat. Clara pointed to one photo, a snowy yard, a crooked tree, kids laughing with frosting on their faces. That one feels like home, she said. It was messy, the mother laughed. The tree almost fell over. The turkey was dry. But we were all together. Together's the best part, Clara said quietly. As the night deepened, the girl began to yawn. She curled up on the rug, her head resting against Clara's knee. Clara, without thinking, reached down and gently brushed a strand of hair from the girl's face. The gesture was so natural, so full of care that no one said a word. They just let it be. Eventually, the parents knew it was time for bed. The girl protested sleepily, not wanting to leave Clara alone, but her eyelids were heavy and her words were starting to slur. I'll be right here, Clara whispered, squeezing her hand. I promise. The girl nodded and let her father carry her upstairs. As he tucked her in, she mumbled, She's nice, Dad. She is, he agreed, smoothing her blanket. Do you think she'll stay? I don't know, he said honestly. But she'll be warm tonight, and that's what matters. Downstairs, the mother had prepared the guest room, the one usually filled with boxes and old winter coats. She'd made the bed with clean sheets, fluffed the pillows, and left a glass of water on the nightstand. She also placed a pair of thick socks and a spare toothbrush on the dresser. When Clara saw the room, she stopped in the doorway. You didn't have to go to all this trouble, she said, her voice thick. It's not trouble, the mother said. It's what you do for someone on Christmas Eve. Clara stepped inside and ran her hand over the quilt. It was soft, worn in just the right places. She turned back, eyes glistening. I haven't slept in a real bed in 3 months, she admitted. I forgot how quiet it is, when you're not worried about someone waking you up or stealing your bag. The mother nodded. Get some rest. There's no rush in the morning. The shelters don't open until 9, and even then we can help you figure out next steps. Clara swallowed hard. Why are you doing this? You don't know me, the mother smiled. Maybe that's the point. On a night like this, maybe we're all supposed to act like we do. She left Clara alone then, closing the door softly behind her. Back in the living room, the father was stoking the fire. The mother sat beside him, resting her head on his shoulder. Do you think she'll be okay? He asked. I don't know, she said, but she's got a fighting chance now, and that's more than she had a few hours ago. They sat in silence for a while, listening to the wind outside and the soft ticking of the old clock on the wall. The tree lights blinked on and off, steady and calm. You know, the father said after a long pause, I was so worried about doing the wrong thing. I almost did nothing at all. His wife squeezed his hand. But you didn't. And because of that, a little girl learned that kindness matters more than fear. And a woman got to feel human again. He nodded. Feels like we got the gift tonight, not her. Upstairs, Clara lay in the dark, wrapped in warmth, listening to the quiet creaks of a house full of people who cared. For the first time in a long time, she didn't feel invisible. She felt seen, held, remembered. And in that moment, Christmas wasn't just a date on the calendar. It was a choice to open your door, your heart, your home. Even when it's icy, Carrie. Even when it's messy. Outside, the snow had stopped falling. The world was still in white, blanketed in peace. And inside, 3 people slept soundly, while one woman, finally warm, whispered a quiet thank you into the dark. Not sure who she was thanking, but grateful all the same. Morning light crept through the curtains, soft and pale, like the world was waking up gently after a long dream. The house was quiet, wrapped in that peaceful hush that only comes on holidays. No alarms, no rushing, just the slow rhythm of breath and the distant hum of the furnace kicking on. Downstairs, the Christmas tree still glowed faintly, its lights left on through the night like a quiet promise. In the guest room, Clara stirred. She opened her eyes slowly, half expecting to see the cracked ceiling of the bus station or the flickering fluorescent lights of the all-night diner. But instead, she saw a clean white ceiling, a patchwork quilt pulled up to her chin, and sunlight spilling across a wooden floor. For a moment, she just lay there, letting the warmth sink into her bones, the deep, heavy warmth of a real bed, thick blankets, and safety. She hadn't slept this well in months, not just because of the comfort, but because for the first time in a long time she hadn't been afraid. No one had shouted at her. No one had told her to move along. No one had looked at her like she was trash. She'd been treated like a person, like someone who mattered. She sat up slowly, wincing as her stiff joints protested. The socks the mother had left for her were still on her feet, thick, woolly, and impossibly soft. She smiled to herself, then stood and padded to the window. Outside, the yard was blanketed in snow, untouched except for a few bird tracks. A cardinal perched on the fence, red as a Christmas ornament against the white. She turned and looked around the room again. On the dresser sat the spare toothbrush, a fresh towel folded neatly beside it. On the nightstand, the glass of water was half empty. She must have drunk it in her sleep. And on the chair by the door lay the blanket from last night, folded with care. She touched her face. Her skin felt clean. Her hair didn't smell like smoke or bus exhaust. She felt human again. Downstairs, the smell of coffee drifted up the stairs, rich and comforting. She hesitated, not sure if she should go down. Maybe they'd changed their minds in the night. Maybe they'd realized how foolish it was to bring a stranger into their home on Christmas Eve. Maybe they were waiting for her to leave quietly, without making a scene. But then she heard a small voice. "Is she awake yet?" "She might be," came the mother's voice, gentle. "Let's give her a few more minutes." Clara took a deep breath and opened the door. The little girl was sitting at the kitchen table, wearing pajamas with reindeer on them, coloring in a holiday coloring book. She looked up the moment Clara appeared and beamed. "You're up!" Clara smiled back a little shyly. "Good morning." The mother stood at the stove flipping pancakes. "Morning," she said warmly. "Sleep okay?" "Better than I have in a long time," Clara admitted, stepping into the kitchen. "Thank you. For everything." "Don't thank us yet," the father said, coming in from the garage with a newspaper under his arm. "You haven't tried the pancakes." The girl hopped down from her chair and tugged Clara toward the table. "Sit here. I saved you the seat with the best view of the tree." Clara sat, still a little stunned by the ease of it all, the way they made room for her like she belonged. The mother set a plate in front of her. Golden pancakes, a pat of butter melting in the center, a small pitcher of real maple syrup. Next to it, a mug of steaming coffee. "I didn't know how you took it," the mother said, "so I left it black. Sugar and cream are right there." Clara wrapped her hands around the mug. "Black is perfect." They ate in comfortable silence for a few minutes, just the clink of forks, the rustle of the newspaper, the soft scratch of crayons on paper. Then the girl looked up. "Do you like Christmas?" she asked Clara. Clara paused, fork halfway to her mouth. "I used to," she said honestly. "It got complicated." "Why?" "Well," Clara said, choosing her words carefully, "when you're alone, holidays can feel really big and really empty at the same time. Like everyone else is celebrating and you're just..." Watching from the outside, the girl frowned. "But you're not outside anymore." Clara's throat tightened. "No," she said softly. "Not today." After breakfast, the father cleared his throat. "So, about today. The downtown shelter opens at 9. They've got beds, hot meals, even job counselors. I can drive you there if you'd like. Clara nodded. I'd appreciate that. But, the mother added quickly, if you're not ready, you can stay a little longer. We're not in a rush. Clara shook her head. I shouldn't overstay. You've already done more than anyone ever has. You're not a burden, the father said firmly. But we also don't want to make things harder for you. If the shelter's your best next step, we'll help you get there. While they talked, the girl slipped out of the room and came back a few minutes later holding something behind her back. She walked up to Clara and held out her hands. It was a small ornament, handmade from a popsicle stick painted gold with glitter glue and tied with a red ribbon. A lopsided star. I made it at school, she said. It's not perfect, but it's bright. Like your name. Clara took it gently, her fingers brushing the rough edges. It's beautiful, she whispered. The most beautiful ornament I've ever seen. Keep it, the girl said. For your tree, when you get one. Clara's eyes filled with tears, but she didn't look away. I will, she promised. I'll hang it where I can see it every day. Later, as Clara gathered her few belongings, the duffel bag, the thin blanket, the cardboard sign she'd folded and tucked away, the family stood by the door, not rushing her, just waiting. Before she left, the mother handed her a paper bag, some extra cookies, she said, and a sandwich, and a scarf. Mine is too big for you, but it's warm. Clara took it, overwhelmed. I don't know how to repay you. You don't have to, the father said. Just keep going. That's enough. The girl hugged her then, quick, tight, and full of feeling. Clara hugged her back, holding on just a second longer than necessary. Then she stepped outside. The morning air was crisp, but not biting. The sun glinted off the snow, turning the whole world into something bright and clean. She turned back once, standing on the porch. The family stood in the doorway, father with an arm around his wife, the little girl waving with both hands. Merry Christmas, the girl called. Clara smiled, really smiled, for the first time in years. Merry Christmas, she said. She walked down the driveway, the paper bag in one hand, the popsicle stick star tucked safely in her coat pocket. She didn't look back again, but she didn't need to. She carried their kindness with her like a flame. At the shelter, things moved slowly but kindly. A woman at the front desk gave her a warm greeting, a hot cup of tea, and a form to fill out. When Clara mentioned she'd stayed with a family the night before, the woman nodded. Happens more than you think on Christmas Eve, she said. People remember what matters. Over the next few days, Clara met with a caseworker who helped her apply for temporary housing assistance. She learned about a job training program for office skills, something she could actually do given her years as a bookkeeper. It wasn't instant. It wasn't magic, but it was a path, and for the first time in a long time she could see it stretching ahead of her. Back at the house, life returned to its usual rhythm, but something had shifted. The little girl started a kindness jar at school. She brought in an old coffee can, decorated it with stickers and glitter, and placed it on her teacher's desk. For people who need help, she explained. Her classmates added spare change, notes of encouragement, even small toys. By the end of the week, the jar was full. Her parents, meanwhile, reached out to the local outreach center. They volunteered to deliver meals one evening a week. They donated coats and blankets they'd been meaning to give away. They didn't do it for praise. They did it because they'd seen how thin the line was between warmth and cold, between safety and struggle. One afternoon, the mother found the little girl sitting by the window, staring out at the street. What are you thinking about? She asked, sitting beside her. Clara, the girl said. I hope she's okay. I think she is, her mother said. Because of you? Because of us, the girl corrected. We all helped, and she was right. Weeks passed. Snow melted, then returned. The holidays faded into January's quiet gray. Life moved on as it does. But the memory of that Christmas Eve stayed with them, not as a story they told, but as a quiet understanding that lived in their actions. Then, on another cold evening just before New Year's, the doorbell rang. The father opened the door, expecting a neighbor or maybe a delivery. Instead, he saw Clara standing on the porch holding a pie tin covered in foil. She wore a clean coat, her hair neatly combed, and her eyes were clear and steady. I didn't want to show up unannounced, she said, but I just had to see you. They invited her in immediately. The little girl ran to her, nearly knocking her over with a hug. Clara laughed, a full, bright sound, and handed the pie to the mother. "I made it myself," she said. "Apple, with a little cinnamon." They sat at the table again, just like that first night, only this time the mood was lighter, hopeful. Clara told them she'd been accepted into the housing program. She had a small apartment now, just one room, but it was hers. She'd started the job training course and was doing well. She even had a part-time shift at the library, shelving books. "It's not much," she said, "but it's a start." "It's everything," the little girl said seriously. Clara reached into her bag and pulled out a small, framed photo. It was a picture of her new room, the bed neatly made, a lamp on the nightstand and hanging on the wall above it, the popsicle stick star glowing in the light. "I look at it every morning," she said. "It reminds me that someone saw me when I felt invisible." The father cleared his throat, blinking fast. "You did the hard part," he said. "You kept going." "No," Clara said, looking at each of them. "You gave me the reason to." They talked for hours that night about books, about the weather, about nothing and everything. And when Clara left, it wasn't with a sense of goodbye, but of connection. They exchanged phone numbers, promised to stay in touch, said, "Come by anytime." As the door closed behind her, the little girl stood in the hallway for a long time, staring at the empty porch. "She's going to be okay," she said finally. Her father put a hand on her shoulder. "Yeah," he said. "She is." And in that moment, they all understood something simple but true. Kindness doesn't end when you close the door. It ripples, it grows, it comes back, sometimes in the form of an apple pie on a winter night, sometimes in the quiet courage of a person rebuilding their life, and sometimes in the heart of a child who never forgot that no one should be left outside on Christmas Eve. The world was still full of cold nights and hard days, but now they knew they could be someone's warmth. And that was the greatest gift of all. Years passed, as they always do, quietly, steadily, like snow falling on a winter night. Seasons turned, holidays came and went, and life settled into its familiar rhythms. The little girl grew taller, her voice deeper, her thoughts more complex. She traded coloring books for novels, reindeer pajamas for hoodies, and bedtime stories for late-night talks with her parents about school, friends, and the kind of world she wanted to live in. But some things never changed. Every Christmas Eve, without fail, the family would drive past the grocery store on Main Street. They never said why out loud, they didn't need to. They'd slow down near the entrance just for a moment and look, not because they expected to see anyone in particular, but because that spot had become sacred to them. It was where kindness had walked in from the cold and changed everything. They never saw Clara there again. And that was a good thing. One December evening, nearly 5 years after that first Christmas Eve, the girl, now a teenager, was helping her mother hang stockings by the fireplace. She'd just finished her first semester of high school and had started volunteering at the local community center, tutoring younger kids in math. She'd also kept the kindness jar going, though it had grown into something bigger now, a student-led outreach group that collected winter coats, school supplies, and holiday gifts for families in need. As she pinned the last stocking in place, the doorbell rang. Her father answered it, brushing flour from his hands. He'd been baking bread, a new holiday tradition. When he opened the door, he froze. Standing on the porch was Clara. She looked different, not in a dramatic way, but in the quiet confidence of someone who'd found her footing. Her coat was new, her boots sturdy, her hair neatly braided. In her arms she carried a pie tin wrapped in a red checkered cloth, and a small potted evergreen with a red ribbon tied around its trunk. "Hi," she said, her voice warm but a little nervous. "I know it's been a while, but I couldn't let another Christmas go by without seeing you." The father stepped aside immediately. "Come in, please." The girl came running from the living room, stopping short when she saw Clara. For a second, they just looked at each other. The child who'd begged her father not to leave a stranger in the cold, and the woman who'd once been that stranger. Then the girl smiled wide and real and pulled Clara into a hug. "You came back," she said. "I told you I would," Clara replied, her eyes glistening. They sat in the same living room, now a little more worn, the tree a bit fuller, the photos on the wall showing more years, more memories. Clara set the pie and the little tree on the coffee table. "I brought you a living Christmas tree," she said. "It's small now, but it'll grow just like everything else." The mother brought out mugs of hot cider and they settled in, the fire crackling beside them. Clara told them about her life since that night, how the housing program had given her stability, how the job training led to a full-time position at a non-profit that helped people rebuild after hardship. She'd even gone back to school part-time, working toward a certificate in social services. "I wanted to do for others what you did for me," she said simply. "Not just give a handout, but see them. Really see them." The girl listened, nodding. "That's what matters most, isn't it? Being seen." Clara reached into her coat pocket and pulled out a small worn envelope. Inside was a folded piece of paper, the original cardboard sign she'd held that Christmas Eve. She'd kept it all these years, not as a reminder of pain, but as a marker of where she'd been and how far she'd come. "I almost threw it away," she admitted, "but then I thought, maybe it's proof that people can change. That help matters. That one night, just one act of kindness can be the turning point." The father leaned forward. "You did the hard work, Clara. We just opened a door." "You opened more than a door," she said gently. "You opened a possibility, and that's everything." As the evening went on, they laughed about small things, the burnt cookies from that first night, the way the dog had tried to steal Clara's slipper, how the little girl had insisted on giving her the best pillow, which was actually the lumpy one. But beneath the laughter was something deeper. Gratitude, yes, but also a shared understanding that their lives had been woven together in a way that couldn't be undone. Before she left, Clara turned to the girl. "I heard about your outreach group," she said. "I'd like to help. Maybe come speak to your students? Share my story, not to make anyone feel sorry for me, but to show them that people aren't defined by their hardest days." The girl's eyes lit up. "Really?" "Really," Clara said. "Because of you, I never forgot what it feels like to be on the outside looking in. And because of that, I know how much it means when someone says, 'Come in.'" Later that night, after Clara had gone and the house was quiet again, the girl sat by the window with her mug of cocoa, watching the snow fall. Her father joined her, sitting in the old armchair nearby. "Do you ever wonder what would have happened if we'd just driven past that night?" he asked softly. She thought for a moment. "I don't wonder," she said. "Because we didn't, and that's what counts." He smiled. "You've got a good heart." "No," she said, shaking her head. "I just had good teachers." The next morning, the family planted Clara's little evergreen in the backyard, near the fence where the cardinal used to visit. They watered it carefully, wrapped its base in burlap for the winter, and promised to watch it grow. Years later, that tree would stand tall, its branches wide, its needles green even in the deepest cold. Neighbors would comment on it during the holidays, how it seemed to glow with quiet strength. And every Christmas, the family would hang one special ornament on its lowest branch, a gold-painted popsicle stick star, slightly faded but still bright. Clara stayed in touch. She came for dinners, helped with school projects, and even attended the girls' high school graduation. She never acted like she owed them anything. Instead, she paid it forward quietly and consistently in ways big and small. She mentored young women coming out of shelters. She organized donation drives. She showed up, and the girl? She went on to study social work in college. On her first day of class, she told her professor about that Christmas Eve, not as a sob story, but as a lesson. That compassion isn't grand gestures. It's noticing. It's stopping. It's saying, "You matter," even when the world says otherwise. One winter break, she returned home and found a letter in the mailbox. It was from Clara, written on simple stationery, sealed with a wax stamp shaped like a star. Inside, she'd written, "I saw a woman sitting outside the bus station last week. She looked tired, cold, and alone. I didn't walk past. I stopped. I bought her coffee. I listened. And when she asked if I knew anywhere warm, I took her to the shelter, just like someone once did for me. You taught me that kindness is a chain. One link leads to another, and yours was the first. Thank you for seeing me when I felt invisible. Clara." The girl folded the letter and tucked it into her journal, right next to the drawing she'd made as a child, a stick-figure family, a snowman and a woman wrapped in a blanket, standing just outside a glowing house. At the top, in wobbly letters, she'd written, "Don't leave her outside." Now, years later, she understood the full weight of those words. They weren't just a plea. They were a promise to keep the door open, the light on, the heart ready. Christmas, she realized, wasn't about perfect trees or wrapped presents. It was about showing up for each other, especially when it's hard, especially when it's cold. And in a world that often feels divided, that simple act of seeing someone, of choosing kindness over comfort, remains the most powerful gift of all. On the next Christmas Eve, the family once again drove past the grocery store. The entrance was empty, just as it had been for years. But this time the girl didn't just look. She smiled, because she knew. Somewhere out there someone was warm tonight, because someone had chosen not to look away. Because one,